Hello again, Struckwork. Today I'm bringing you another skills showcase for a class in Torchlight 3, and today is the turn of the Dusk Mage. So I would be showing you all of the light skills first and then the dark skills. So you can hopefully decide whether you want to be using this skill or that skill in your setup, in your build, whether you want to spend points into this skill or that skill. And along with that I would also be showing you some legendary items that you might want to equip or put in the legendary when using certain skills, or when you want to cast certain skills while using other skills. So let's start with Absolver. It is a light skill and it basically shoots 3 piercing holy bolts, and the mana cost is just 10% over that of holy bolts. A holy bolt costs 2 mana, this one by default costs 2.2, and with the Arc of Light item, while casting holy bolt you have a 50% chance to cast Absolver. And one of my viewers told me the way items like this work is that you are casting the skill with its upgrade. So I have not tested it myself because I don't have similar items to test it, but for example, the way it's supposed to work is when you're casting Holy Bolt, it would cast Absolver with all of its upgrades. So if you have a max level Absolver, it will be casting that one. Which is pretty nice, and I'm thinking that many of you might want to experiment with such a build if you're going for a light setup. So hopefully you get this item and test it. So apart from it being 3 piercing holy bolts, you could also combine it with certain nice things like energy spike, and you can use the cono shape of Absolver with the cono shape of Dark Spears. And since Absolver can get kind of upgraded to be much stronger than the base version, it probably would be a nice setup to try. Next will be Consecration. Consecration not only buffs you when standing inside the circle, but it buffs you when there's allies in the circle. So something you might want to consider is the King Snaggletooth, which makes it that it also poisons enemies and deals 125% weapon damage per second. But also keep in mind that when you have summons in the circle, they do count as allies, and your damage can increase greatly because you can get up to 5 allies, giving you up to 15% times 5. So combine that with the 25 you get for yourself, or more depending on whether you've upgraded it or not, but let's say you got 25% from it, and then you get another 75%, you get 100 just by having 5 summons inside the circle. Pretty strong, pretty fun to experiment with, and it's a great boost for any build if you can keep yourself long enough in the circle. So for some Dusk Mages, if you don't have survivability and you can't keep yourself in one place for too long, it may not be that great, but I've always loved using Consecration in my previous alpha and beta builds. So eventually when I gear up here I would be making some fun setups, and that can combine very well with the tier 3 Consecration and a Vitality Extractor Holy Fury, which brings us to Holy Fury. A beam, your typical channeling beam skill for mage. It's a holy ray of light that pierces and swallows enemies, and with the Vitality Extractor it makes the skill so that you regenerate 5% of max HP per second, and it also increases your poison defense by 100%. So if you have 3000 poison defense, that turns into 6000. If you have 30,000, that's gonna be 60,000, and so on. And it's only the poison defense. This combines very well with Consecration and the tier 3 Consecration healing, so consider that synergy of this item, maxed out Holy Fury maybe, and maxed out Consecration, and you standing inside the circle while draining life. And you can modify Consecration to also be poison, and if anyone comes near you, you can kind of stack that damage as well. It's a decent skill, and especially the fact that it can pierce and it can slow, and combining it with Dark Spears would give you the maximum slow, which is 80%. 80% of reduced attack and movement speed of an enemy when you combine Dark Spears and Holy Fury. And this brings us to Light Spear, another white skill. This one is piercing as well, and it also uses a charges system similar to the movement skills of all classes. So it regenerates charges at a certain rate, which should be based on mage skill cooldowns, which you could reduce by 10% by investing into certain skill for the synergies. It's kind of probably gonna be very strong with a specific build with enough damage and with enough cooldown reduction. Unfortunately, you do not, at least I haven't seen any items that reduce the cooldown or that makes this regenerate and gain charges faster, and there are no legendary items that modify this yet. Hopefully Michael Mayhem would make items that are centered around Light Spear. So the next skill I would talk about would be the Light Trees movement skill. This is Luminous Run. Luminous Run gives you a short burst of speed, and it also makes you dash forward in a certain direction, and throughout the whole duration from activating the skill until the movement speed bonus is over, you are kind of able to face and walk and pass through enemies. So basically you become kind of, I'm not sure if it's called intangible in this game officially, but I think that's kind of how it is. And you can also, with tier 1 upgrade of this skill, regenerate some 10% of your max HP when you use it. So it's pretty decent escape mechanic. It's probably my favorite between the two. I kind of prefer this one more than Shadow Step, at least for most of the setups, but for my white build I'm using Shadow Step, and for my dark build I'm using Luminous Run, which kind of is weird, but I guess it might make sense to some of you. So now next is Radiant Blast. This skill changed greatly from what it used to be. It used to be just an AoE centered around us, so like a shockwave around us, but now it's first it's a long range skill. Second, it's able to apply a certain debuff, which makes the enemies afflicted by it explode on death for 100% weapon damage. That's after you get the tier 1 bonus. So it's pretty nice, and again with another bonus, with the tier 3 bonus, exploding infused enemies infuses the enemies they hit. So that's pretty fun, nice chain reaction setup you can have with explosions. I haven't seen those explosions do damage to nearby enemies. I tried to make them, and I'm not sure whether I could. I mean, I was seeing the initial damage of Radiant Blast on the enemies next to those who explode, but I haven't seen the explosions dealing damage to the enemy, so I'm not sure whether it works or whether I'm just bad at testing. But in any case, it seems like a fun setup, and you can make it one-shot enemies and bosses with the right item that you just saw earlier. So next off, let's move on to Holy Bolt. Holy Bolt is your basic skill that you start with, and it can be very strong, especially when you charge it and when you upgrade it. You can see the tier 1 charge bonus while Holy Charge fire 2 Holy Bolts, and as I mentioned while talking about Absolver, Arc of Light allows you to cast Absolver with a 50% chance when you use Holy Bolt, and that's apparently the upgraded version of Absolver. So if you upgrade your Absolver, and this would be casting that version. So decent skill, I really like it as a starting point of a light skills build, and I think many of you might enjoy putting points into it in the early levels, because it's super strong, especially in single target, and especially when you get light charged. Definitely something to look forward to in some of the light builds. It's not OP skill, but with the right relic, like for example the Whitening relic, the Electrode, and with the Lightning Strikes, the level 15 skill maxed out to chance, you might be able to keep proccing those Whitenings all of the time on enemies with the shock chance setup. Now Energy Spike, this is the first dark skill I wanna show you. And it goes very well with my Absolver setup. I was trying to have this quickly building up the white bar. You can see a few casts of this skill would build up the light bar. It used to not have cooldown, and now it does, so it's kind of nerfed, but with the Ebon Grasp you can make it to give you a barrage of Unholy Bolts. I'm assuming that's gonna be the upgraded Unholy Bolts if you have them upgraded. While you have the Dark buff active. So that's an interesting synergy, casting Unholy Bolts while you have Dark buff active and use Energy Spike. It does a lot of damage still, but with that cooldown it's kind of not as OP as before, which I see why. I mean, it used to be super powerful, and before Entropy got buffed up, this was the meta mage skill. Thankfully now it's not that bad, and people are not gonna be just everyone using Energy Spike or Entropy. So that brings us to Damnation. Damnation is amazing to keep you alive, to make the enemies do less damage. So you can just cast it on a bunch of enemies and then curse them and afflict them so that they do 30% less damage. And it is good to say that this lasts for 8 seconds, but if an enemy leaves the area of effect that keeps afflicting them, that debuff would last for 4 seconds on them. So even if the area of effect ends up after 8 seconds and the enemy spends 8 seconds, there's gonna be another 4 seconds on there. So you might be able to just keep it up all the time, because the cooldown is 10 seconds. It lasts for 8, but you still have 4 seconds afterwards, so you can kind of keep a boss if it doesn't move away from the area, afflicted with it throughout its whole duration. It's pretty nice for builds where you just think you need some more survivability. Now the next skill I want to show you is Dark Spears. And this one is very good at the very first few levels on a Dusk Mage, on Ridiculous. I always take this as level 2 skill because it does a decent amount of damage. It's an AoE, it can slow enemies, so it's a great help early on. And with the right item you can do this effect that you're seeing on the screen. That it allows you to call down a lightning bolt, stunning enemies inside for 1 second and dealing 80% weapon damage. When you upgrade it, you can also make it do the damage immediately instead of over time, and be just 100% weapon damage rather than this different amount of damage per second for a few seconds. It goes very well with Holy Fury to stack the 2 slows of 2 times 50%, to get the limit of slow for attack and movement speed, which is 80%. It's a decent setup in many builds, so you might want to use it, you might want to just skip it, it's up to you. But I really like it. Now Entropy is the next skill we want to talk about, and this one is a meta skill. It can, with the right item, with the right gear, one-shot bosses. So you can wear items 3 levels higher than your level. And that means even if you're level 60, if you find a level 63 item, which probably you won't be able to, I think level 61 might be the highest you find from monsters of level 60, or maybe of level 61. But if you do have, for example, if you're level 57 and you find a level 60 item, super strong one, and maybe use a Molten Reach either as a main weapon or put it into the Legendarium, this can do so much damage with a maxed out Entropy. Because all those explosions and all those bolts that are proccing, everything would do so much damage that is just unbelievable. Before, two-handed weapons didn't used to be this strong because focus weapons used to have built-in damage. Now I think two-handed weapons might not be that bad compared to one-handed focus item, unless you have triple enchantments on both the one-handed weapon and the focus item and you have plenty of flat damage there. Then of course that might be the better option. I personally prefer using focus items because of the mana regen. And this skill drains a lot of mana. And this brings us to Shadow Step, which can give you some passive mana regeneration. It's your teleport blink skill that sometimes can proc through walls. You gotta learn which walls and where exactly you need to point your cursor to teleport, but you can see, for example, like this, you can teleport down there. It's very nice if you want to be grouping up a lot of enemies and then escape from them and then just spam AoEs and rain hell upon them. with Entropy or Dark Spears or Absolver or whatever else you want to be using, like Holy Fury. It's a decent skill. I still prefer Luminous Run a little bit more, but this one might be many people's preferred choice. And some people might want to use Luminous Run and Shadow Step for speedrunning build, which could go pretty well as well if you don't need that many damage skills in the skill bar. It's a nice setup, and that 15% increased mana regeneration might be pretty nice, and having this have 4 charges would make it probably better than a Luminous Run with 3 charges. So you gotta keep that in mind as well. So now this brings us to Spirit Well. Spirit Well is your summoner build, and again, if you combine it with Consecration, that can give you extra damage based on the amount of summons in there when you're solo. You can get it to summon a Netherim Warrior at tier 1, and at tier 3 it can summon a Netherim Brute. I really wish that the Netherim Brute would be a taunting Netherim Brute. If a developer ends up watching this, I really hope they would consider adding a Netherim Brute taunt effect, so that we have more appeal to using them. I've seen other people use them, and I think it's not bad, but yeah, right now pets are kind of underwhelming. This 65% damage to pets only applies to our real pet, not to the summons. So hopefully soon we would see a rework for those passive bonuses each class has that give us 65% damage to pets, to maybe make it 25, 30, 35% damage to summons and pets. For example, the Bane Spiderlings, the Golems from the Ice Relic, the Automatons and the Goblin Hounds and Netherlings from different types of shoulders, or our Netherim Well, or the Goblins from the Goblin Legion or Shasta, and so on. All those types of allies would really benefit from that rework. The skill is pretty nice because it can still help you body block some enemies, keep them far from you, put them in a choke point. So I really love using it even in non-summoner builds myself. Not sure about whether how useful that is. So Unholy Bolt, a great level 1 skill that you can use if you want as soon as level 2. Right now many people are asking for them to not spend our first point, and that would mean many people might wanna start with Unholy Bolt and not start with Holy Bolt on a mage, and this one can have a very nice synergy. For example, this increases the number of unholy projectiles to 5. And with Ebon Grasp, as I talked, it allows you to cast Unholy Bolts when you're using Energy Spike, when you have the Dark buff active. This allows you to get extra 2 more bolts, so maybe that's gonna make it up to 7 bolts, which is pretty fun considering that all those bolts kinda have a randomized direction of travel. So sometimes all of them would go right, all of them would go left, some of them would go forward, the others would go right, the left one could go right, the right one could go left, and so on. Pretty randomized, but pretty fun skill to use nevertheless. So I hope this video was helpful. I hope you loved the images as a suggestion for what things you might want to synergize together. If you wanna get notified for more content about this game or others like it, or various different types of RPGs, ARPGs, tactical RPGs, all sorts of RPGs, or other types of looters, you could subscribe to my channel, get that bell button clicked to not miss those notifications. Thanks again for watching the video, folks. Keep it cool, and until next time, goodbye.